Hello everyone and welcome to Kerbal Space Program 2 version 0.2.0. That is the For Science update. And today we're going to be looking at, once again, how to get to Minmus. But right now I'm just clearing off these contracts from last episode to help me see what new contracts I have coming to me. And you can see here that we have a pile of new missions for us to do, and the primary one here is the Minmus Monument, and we're going to be doing that pretty much right away because this is going to be the focus of not only this episode, but the next one as well. And this is requiring us to find a mysterious signal source that is on the surface of Minmus. Very similar to the Moon Monument one, where you had to land very close to the Moon Monument. This one, there is another monument, and we're going to be needing to land very close to it, and we're going to bring Kerbals along this time. There are, though, and I really want to draw attention to some of these, some other contracts here under secondary, because you got to be careful picking these up. Don't pick them up willy-nilly. So, for instance, the geostationary orbit contract, I'm not going to do it in this video, but this one's perfectly fine. This one's a pretty easy one to do. Send a probe, put it into a particular orbit, tells you the altitude of it around Kerbin, no problem at all. But some of these other ones, well, they are non-trivial. For instance, the Little Chonker contract asks you to put 200 tons, I want to make sure we're reading that right, 200 tons onto the surface of Minmus. Yes, you have to land a vessel that has a mass of at least 200 tons on Minmus' surface. That is monstrous. I just want to point it out in case you just get into, I'm going to track that mission, I'm going to do it. It's doable, but it is non-trivial. Let's put it that way. And also this one here, probably not quite as difficult as the Little Chonker. This Kerbin-wide tour for the Cappy Rock. Launch a vessel with a lander can and perform a crew observation at Cappy Rock. Cappy Rock is a very specific location on Kerbin. You must bring the Sean Connery, that is the two-person crew can. We've yet to unlock that, and then you have to land it very close to a specific waypoint, very similar to the Moon Monument, very similar to the Minmus Monument, except this time you're going through an atmosphere, which makes it even trickier, despite the fact that it is on Kerbin's surface. Again, doable, but non-trivial, so be careful about that. But the focus of this episode is going to be going back to Minmus again. And this time we're going to bring a Kerbal. Well, turns out we kind of already have a craft that can do that, because I have here the Moonar 2. Where is it? There's where it's hiding. And I went into great detail showing how this build was done. You can check out this video up here if you want the details on how I did that. But the truth of the matter is, if you built a craft that is capable of landing on the moon and returning that Kerbal back to Kerbin, you have a craft that is capable of landing on Minmus. The Delta V requirements to get to Minmus and come back are less than that for the moon. So I'm simply going to reuse this craft again, except for one last thing. I do have a new science part that I unlocked at the beginning of this. The little sniffers here. There is the ASCM-A air sniffer and the ASCM-B little sniffer. They are functionally the same. They collect the same amount of, they collect the same kind of science. There is a difference in mass. This little sniffer is 50 kilograms and this one is 1,000 kilograms. Yeah, quite a difference there. I don't know why you would use this now when you have this one available. This one, by the way, this one's a radial part and this one is not a radial part, but whatever. I'm going to be using the little sniffer here because it is so light. And the thing that's a little different about this science part, if we go over and take a look at the part that's in the blue, is that first you must be flying on a body with an atmosphere. And of course we will be in an atmosphere as we are sending up through Kerbin's atmosphere, so we'll be collecting the science there. Also, if you look at the bottom of that blue part, it says experiment duration 2 minutes. It takes 2 minutes to collect all of the science. It's over a period of time. Thankfully, that is less than the amount of time it takes us to get to orbit. No problem whatsoever. Now notice with one thing is that this thing collects both data and samples. Look at the second line in the blue part. That's what tells you that. That means we do need to return the science back to Kerbin if we want to, but don't forget that all of that science gets stored with our Kerbal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little piece and I'm simply going to attach it to, actually I'm going to attach it down here. it can be on this part that we're going to be losing, because this science will be completed by the time we stage this particular booster. And don't forget, any samples automatically travel to the Kerbal at the top. You don't have to return the actual equipment. And once we're in space and obviously landing on Minmus, there is no atmosphere, so this thing is useless on the lander part. So we're going to put it down here. It's going to collect our science for us anyway, and it's automatically going to be with our Kerbal. Otherwise, well, I'm just going to make sure, pick ourselves a Kerbal. Oh my gosh, we got ourselves a hippie. Tomming, you're coming with us. Let's go. Okay, so this is going to be our second trip to Minmus, and I showed you a way to get to Minmus in the previous launch, so I'm going to show you a different way, and then you can decide which way you're going to like. So let's go into map view and remind ourselves of what the issue is with Minmus, and it's of course that it is in an inclined orbit, and we need to get into that inclination one way or another. Now, what the game suggested that you do is that you, once you put yourself into orbit about Kerbin, that you change your inclination at that time to match the inclination of Minmus. And that will work, but it's an expensive thing to do. You can also launch yourself into that inclination, and it's not that hard to do. Here's how you need to do it. Now, the first thing you need to do is you need to do it at the right time. You need to launch when your launch site is right below Minmus's orbit. So how are we going to determine that? Well, we're going to start by focusing our view on Kerbin, just like that, and then we're going to rotate our camera so that we're a little bit to the right of the launch site. The launch site's a little bit to the left of us, and then we're going to scroll out. Now, unfortunately, there are a lot of orbits here for us to see, but the ones we need to focus on are the Moon and Minmus. Now, the Moon is conveniently at an inclination of 0. So what I'm going to do, here's the Moon's orbit here, is I'm going to move my camera, drag the camera, so that the Moon is exactly edge on. Okay, so now I know I'm looking right down onto Kerbin's equator. Then I'm going to scroll out, and here's Minmus's orbit here. Ignore all the extra debris, extra orbits that we see. They don't matter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag my camera to the right until Minmus's orbit is also edge on. Just like so. Okay, and I'm going to scroll in a little bit. I want to make sure the Moon's orbit's edge on, so I might do a little bit of adjusting there to make sure the Moon's orbit is edge on. That's good. Scroll out again, do a little bit more adjusting to get the Minmus's orbit edge on. So you want both the Moon and Minmus edge on. Okay, I think we're getting close enough. There's no reason to be super duper precise with this. The closer you can get, the better though. Now, when our launch site is directly in the center of Kerbin, right here, it's going to be directly below Minmus's orbit. So what you need to do is simply time warp until you see our launch site, which is right here, is in the center of Kerbin's little circle here. So I would advise doing a quick save here because it's really easy to over time warp. And we're going to do a little bit of time warping. Slow down. And it's actually good to stop a little bit early. And again, there's no need to be perfect with this. No matter what you do, you're going to make your transfer to Minmus easier, even if this isn't perfect. The closer you can get, the better, but it doesn't have to be perfect. I need to get a little closer here. Here we go. All right, I'm going to stop right around there. I think that looks good. Now, what we need to do, though, to get into Minmus's orbit, if you notice, Minmus's orbit is actually going towards the south. See, it's going down as we go from left to right. So that means I need to launch towards the south on the nav ball. So 90 degrees is due east. South is up here at the top, so we need to launch more this way. The numbers get bigger as you move south of 90. Minmus's inclination, again, is 6 degrees. You can look that up in the tracking station, or you can just simply trust me, it is 6 degrees. So what I need to do is, instead of going at a heading of 90 degrees, I'm going to go at a heading of 96 degrees. 6 degrees south of 90. Well, not quite. Turns out there's already a bit of an orbital prograde vector thanks to Kerbin's rotation, and we need to pull that northwards a little bit. There's already a bit of momentum pulling us towards the east. Or not northwards, southwards. I'm getting mixed up because the south is up on the nav ball. So instead of going to 96 degrees, I'm going to go a little bit ahead of that. or a little bit past that and go to 97 degrees. So basically, we're just going to go launch normally, except instead of this being 90, we're going to go for 97. Now I would advise doing a quick save so that if you want to revert back to launch, you can just revert back to this quick save and not have to do the time warping again. But basically, we're just going to push this. So, boom, and off we go. And we're going to do all of this normally. I'm waiting for my surface speed to get up around 75 meters per second. Remember, I want to get a little bit faster. Notice my science light is blinking. I'm going to click that just to get stuff started, but I do want to, but I'm going to talk about it after I deal with all of this. So we're going to pitch a little bit towards the east and a little bit northward or southwards. And we're looking at this heading feature. Let's lock this onto prograde. And I can see here, let's let this settle down. The heading is a little bit too high. It's 103, 102. So I'm going to go, I also think I'm pitching over a little bit too quickly. So I'm going to pull it back towards the 90 on the nav ball. Let's settle back onto the prograde vector. Still a little bit too high, so again I'm just tapping on the W key, that's all I'm doing, pulling it a little bit closer to the 90, letting it settle back out. And 95, 96, 97, went actually a little bit too far, but I think it's pretty darn close. So I'm just going to let this ride at this point at about 90. Let it ride for a little bit. We'll see how we do. And what I want to draw attention to the fact is that we got a little green animation going on over here with the science experiment. If I close this and actually click on our science experiment and look here, you can see that our atmospheric survey status is actually running. We got still 50 seconds left to run on that. That is going automatically. Thankfully, we'll still have this booster at that time. Right now, I'm actually going to reduce my throttle here a little bit because we're at like a minute and a half to apoapsis. And we're going to be losing these boosters in just a moment. There they go. Boom, like that. This is bouncing around 96, 97. That is perfect. I can again do little adjustments if I want to pull that a little bit more towards the south. 97 is about the right inclination for this. I'm also noticing my apoapsis is getting very close to 80, so I'm probably going to have to be cutting my throttle anyway. And there we go, our science experiment is done while we're still in the atmosphere. And remember that that sample is stored with the Kerbal. So don't worry about the fact that I'm about to stage this lower stage and lose that science equipment. It doesn't matter. Okay, we are almost at 80 kilometers here, so I'm just going to be cutting my throttle in a little bit. And then we're just going to circularize as per normal. Alright, there we go. We are now in an orbit, and let's take a look at our situation here. So you can see our orbit is in a nice inclination. And if we take a look at Minmus's orbit, which is the purple line here, we can scroll out. You can see we roughly match Minmus's orbit. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Closer the better, though. So let's see if we cannot... Let's see how getting to Minmus works for us now. So we're going to set Minmus as a target. This is all the same sort of deal. We're going to put a maneuver plan down here. And again, this one's going to be a prograde burn of about 920 to 930 meters per second. Burning it way too late. Oh, we are getting ourselves an encounter here right away. Let's see if we can adjust our Minmus PE a little bit. Without any correction at all. Now you might find, well, we are probably going to have to do some correction, but you can see, even though it's not perfect, we are getting that Minmus encounter, and this is going to make our transfer all that much easier. Now one thing, let's focus our view on Minmus, because there is something I do need to show you. If we take a look at the little look at Minmus here, this is the waypoint where we need to land, and it is very close to Minmus's North Pole. So the best plan here is to insert ourselves into an orbit that will be a polar orbit coming up. We're going to want to come right above the North Pole or right above the South Pole. It absolutely makes no difference. So I'm going to grab my maneuver here. And we're going to see if we can adjust that. I think I'm just going to play with the... Let's see if I can play with the timing of it a little bit. Come back here. Too many icons. First again, we'll play around a little bit with the timing, see if I can get it closer just by adjusting the time. Oh, that lost my encounter entirely, so I might be at the end of that. Yeah. So what we'll do is grab this maneuver here and probably a little bit more prograde. Let's zoom in a little bit. Don't really need to see how close this is. But I'm happen to be coming to the north of it, so I'm going to, I'll go with that. You might be coming to the south of it. You might be hitting it smack dab in the middle. All of that doesn't matter. We'll deal with that with a correction. Right now, though, we have ourselves a 935 meter per second burn to perform. I'm going to turn down the thrust limiter here, make this a really fine adjustment. Focus our view back on Minmus. Wonderful. Of course, we're still going to have to do a very small mid-course correction here. We're going to pull this a little bit to the south. Want to get that Minmus periapsis to be around a little over 60 kilometers. That avoids that time warping throttle that the game imposes on you. And if you want to move it a little bit to the left or to the right, you can use the radials, but I'm actually going to use the prograde retrograde to do that because, well, frankly, from this angle, it's really hard to grab those radial ones. Both will work. And of course, we'll just time warp out to that. That's a very tiny little burn with the throttle limiter very, very low. And then once in Minmus's sphere of influence, we got a whole ton of science to perform because this is the first time we've gotten science equipment and a Kerbal into Minmus's sphere of influence. And as far as the capture and all that kind of stuff, same thing you've seen around the moon, the same thing you saw last episode when I was getting my capture in around Minmus. But remember that this episode was really about how to get to Minmus, presenting this alternate way of getting there. I did one way last episode, one way this episode, and next episode what we're going to be doing, of course, is getting down there to the surface. And also, we're going to be at the North Pole. Getting back to Kerbin, it's going to take a little bit more thinking than it did when we were coming back from the moon. But all of that's going to be next episode. I hope to see you then.